Welcome to the Gifted and Talented End of Year Training. My name is Kathy Anderson, and I am the Gifted Education Consultant for the Kentucky Department of Education. Thank you for your time today. The purpose of the end of year training is to go over the necessary steps for data cleanup so that regulation reports can be submitted to the Kentucky Department of Education. Here are today's topics: dates and reports, data correction and cleanup, validation of student records, annual program evaluation, directions for completing the summative evaluation. First, let's discuss reports and dates to be submitted. These are the important dates. Data and records should be corrected by May 31st. The following slides will assist you with this process. All GT end-of-year records are due June the 1st. The last day to enter GT records for the school report card is June the 30th. GT records can be entered after June the 30th to prepare for the upcoming school year. State assessed areas for the school report card validation report. This is a report that validates general intellectual ability, or GIA, and the students identified for the subcategories of specific academic aptitude, which are language arts, math, science, and social studies. This report ensures that all students have been correctly identified for the GT program since there are specific regulations and criteria. Validation of GT records ensures that all GT records have been imported to the district so that students are not missing services. The summative evaluation comes from the Section 9 of the Gifted Regulation that states a summative evaluation and report of progress must be submitted to the Kentucky Department of Education. Therefore, there is a short form for districts to complete regarding their GT program and overall progress of GT students. The links to these reports are posted on the GT Coordinator One Stop. You cannot save responses and then go back and complete the reports. You may want to print out the reports and review your responses and then complete the Google Forms for these reports. The first step in the process is records correction. To correct GT records, staff may need to work with the Kentucky Student Information System CASIS contact. You may need to work with the CASIS contact or someone with rights to the ad hocs to ensure data in the system is correct because some districts are cautious in giving rights to multiple sections. To get started, secure the necessary rights or contact your CASIS person to work with you. Log into Infinite Campus. Proceed to the Ad hoc Reporting section of Infinite Campus. Click Data, Export. Locate the State Published Filter section of Ad hoc Reporting. The following ad hoc filters should appear in the State Published section. Some of these you will use for data cleanup, and then some of them may just be helpful for you in general, such as the student G&T student list. Let's first review the invalid general intellectual ability report. The invalid general intellectual ability cleanup report, or GIA, helps you look for students who do not have the 9th Stay 9 checked or special considerations checked. Follow these directions to use the invalid GIA report. Select the current school year, then select Tool from the Search drop-down list. Next, type Data Export in the search bar. Select the ad hoc for GIA from the State Published Ad hoc list. Select Delimited Values, CSV. Once all settings are selected, click Export. After clicking Export, a spreadsheet will generate with any students in the district that have an invalid GIA entry. Students marked as GIA must have one of the following criteria indicated by the red arrows on the slide in order to be a valid entry. The boxes that are checked in blue are what have been checked on the record, but the red arrows indicate what the IC logic is looking for. The reason the student is on the report is because one of these boxes has not been selected. The district should check the student's evidence to determine which boxes should be selected. Based on the documentation, check the correct box. For each student listed on the spreadsheet or the invalid report, search for the student in the district's Infinite Campus site. Once a student is found, proceed to the GIA GT invalidation, the GIA GT record report. Review the student's GT folder to determine the correct areas to be marked. If the correct identification evidence is in the folder, select one of the evidences that applies and click Save. If evidences are not available to determine the student's correct placement and the student transferred from another district, contact the GT coordinator from the previous district and request the documentation. If the previous district does not have the documentation, begin to collect identification documentation. This may be documentation that is in the student's file or could be new identification evidence such as teacher observations. This does not mean that you are reevaluating the student. We are just collecting evidence for the students as needed by a criteria listed in the regulation. If an assessment is not listed on the drop-down menu, contact the GT consultant to ensure the assessment meets the regulation criteria. If the assessment meets regulation criteria, select Other from the drop-down menu. Once all correct boxes have been checked, click Save. Proceed through the student records. Once each record is completed or corrected, generate the report again to ensure that all changes have been saved. Next, we will review the Invalid Specific Academic Aptitude, or SAA report. This report looks for records that did not have the 9th Stay 9 or special considerations checked. Select the current school year, select Tool from the Search drop-down list, type Data Export in the search bar. Select the ad hoc for SAA from the state published ad hoc list. Select Delimited Values, CSV. Once all the settings are selected, click Export. After clicking Export, a spreadsheet will generate with any students for the district that have an invalid SAA entry. Students marked as SAA must have one of the following criteria indicated by the red arrows below in order to be a valid entry. Here's an example. Blue boxes are what have been checked on the record. The red arrows are what need to be checked to correct the record. Only one red arrow box must be checked for the record to be corrected. To select the correct box, the district must check Student folder for identification documentation. Then select the correct box. For each student listed on the report, which will be an Excel spreadsheet, search for the student in the district's IC site. Once the student is found, proceed to his or her SAA GT record. GT area codes are listed rather than the words for SAA. The SAA areas codes are 04 for language arts, 05 for math, 06 for science, and 07 for social studies. If the evidences are not available to determine the student's current placement and the student transferred from another district, contact the GT coordinator from the previous district and request documentation. If the previous district does not have documentation, please begin to collect the documentation from your district. If you need assistance, please contact the GT state consultant. If an assessment is not offered on the drop-down menu, contact the GT state consultant to ensure the assessment meets regulation criteria. If the assessment meets the regulation criteria, select Other from the drop-down menu. Once all correct boxes have been checked, click Save. Complete this process for each student record on the ad hoc report. Once each record is updated or corrected, generate the report again to ensure all changes are saved to the record and there are no students listed on the invalid report. Now let's look at the invalid gifted category ad hoc report. The invalid GT category report is a report that shows students who are too young to be formally identified. To generate the report, follow these steps. Select the current school year. Select Tool from the search drop-down list. Type Data Export in the search bar. Select the ad hoc for G&T invalid gifted category from the state published ad hoc list. Select Delimited Values, CSV. Once all settings are selected, click Export. After clicking Export, a spreadsheet will generate with any students for the district that have an invalid gifted category record. In order to have a formally identified GT category, a student must be in grades 4 through 12 and have appropriate evidence marked for identification. Students generated on this report are currently in grades K through 3, but have a formal identification such as GIA or SAA. In order to correct these records, the student's invalid record should be changed to Primary Talent Pool or PTP. Next, let's look at the invalid Primary Talent Pool ad hoc. This report lists the students who are too old to be in Primary Talent Pool or PTP. Don't forget, when creating a new PTP record, to pre-indate the record. Pre-indating saves you time so that you don't have to go back at the end of 3rd grade and indate the record. Follow these directions to generate the report and correct the student's record. First, generate the invalid Primary Talent Pool ad hoc report by finding the report in the state published list. This report will list all students who are too old to be in PTP. These would be students who are in 4th through 12th grades. Using the SSIDs listed on the report, find the student's GT record in Infinite Campus and indate the student's PTP record using the estimated date the student exited 3rd grade. When all students on the list have been corrected, generate the list again to ensure there are no more records to be corrected. While correcting records, you may run across a record with only 2 evidences. This may seem unusual or strange because you can't save a record in Infinite Campus without checking 3 evidence boxes. In August of 2020, the Other checkbox was deleted from the GT record and the new Special Considerations checkbox was added. Records with the Other checkbox marked now have 2 evidences. The Other checkbox is hidden in the background where you can't see it, but it may have been used for special considerations or another valid evidence for the student. Review the documentation in the student's file for the missing evidence. Update the student's record with the correct 3rd checkbox and click Save. Once data has been corrected for the GIA, the SAA, and PTP invalid reports, the SSA for school report card validation can be completed. This is a Google form, and it can't be saved and completed later. You may want to print out the report or review the questions before submitting the responses. Save a copy of the report for district records. For this report, the GT coordinator will initial that all data is correct for the school report card. Next, we're going to look at the validation of student records report. In order to ensure data is correct for the school report card and to ensure that we haven't missed any students for services, we must validate records that are correct between the state and local data sets. You might want to generate these reports on a regular basis to ensure GT students who transfer are receiving services. Validation of records is important because it ensures GT students who transfer are not missing services, and it ensures data between state and district is correct. To ensure all GT data is correct for the school report card and that GT students are not missing, data should be reviewed and validated. To correct and update the records, the following process should occur. There should be a comparison of records between state and local data sets. And if there are any missing student records on the local data set or the state data set, these student records should be located and then added or corrected. And once the data is correct, the GT coordinator will complete the validation of GT records report using a link to the Google form. Before completing the validation of GT records report, you may want to print and review the Google form. This report can't be saved and completed later. The form will request state and local data sets for each category. The numbers for state and local data sets should match. For the data sets to be compared, two spreadsheets will be generated, one for state data and one for local data. To generate a local and state data set, the data validation group must be available from the Data Validation Group drop-down menu. The Data Validation Group drop-down should have a Gifted and Talented group option. If it is blank, contact your cases person for assistance. All cases contacts for each district are listed in the KDE District and School Open House directory. See Data Validation Report and Validation Groups for more information. To find the validation report, click Tool, then search for the Data Validation Report. These are the steps for generating the state and local data sets. While the Data Validation Group is blank now, if the Data Validation Group has been selected, you will see Gifted and Talented in the drop-down. Two reports will be generated from local and state data sets. Select Data Validation Report. Under Data Validation Group, select Gifted and Talented. Under Report Data Source, select Local Dataset. Under Output Options, select CSV under Format Type. Click Generate. To generate the validation report, you will want to save the local data set report. Then for the state data set, you will repeat steps 1 through 7, but you're going to select State Dataset. Save the State Dataset report. Once both datasets are generated, you will examine the datasets to ensure a direct match of student records. Students with multiple records may appear several times, but this is because they are identified in several categories. How to correct missing records is addressed on the next several slides. Compare the records from each report, looking for discrepancies between the two reports. If there are no discrepancies, complete the GT Records Validation Report by June the 1st. An example of a discrepancy would be as follows. Jane has 3 records on the state report, and she should have 3 records on the local report. She might have a language arts, a math, and a visual performing arts record on the state report. Therefore, she should have these same 3 records on the local report. If she does not have 3 records on each report, use the following troubleshooting steps to correct the records. This is a scenario where there are more students on the state dataset than on the local dataset. If the student has an end date, the student moved to another district. The new district probably identified the student after leaving your district. Because the student was in your district this school year, the student is listed on the state dataset report. If the student is not listed on your report, although they were enrolled in your district at one time, they were not identified as GT. When listing the discrepancy on the Validation of GT Records report, do not use names. Please just use the SSID number of the student for privacy and for confidentiality of the student. This discrepancy cannot be fixed because the student has moved out of your district. These are the only SSIDs that should be listed on the Google form as discrepancies. For other issues or discrepancies, please see the next troubleshooting slides. In the second scenario, the student appears on the state list, but not on the district list and does not have an end date. Review the student's GT record in Infinite Campus. If they do not have a GT record for the district, check the Records Transfer tab to see if there is a GT record that was not imported when the student transferred. If there is no GT record to import, attempt to import the record from the prior district using the Infinite Campus Student Records Transfer Standard. In order to know where to send the records transfer request, the district may need to know where the student was last enrolled. If you're unable to see where the student was last enrolled, contact the GT state consultant. This is the last scenario. This is scenario number 3. The student appears on the district list but not on the state list. Ask your case's contact to manually sync the student's record to the state. Run the state list again to ensure the student is on the list. If the student is still not on the list, contact the GT state consultant. For any new students imported, contact the previous district for their GT student identification documentation. Sometimes there is confusion between a GT record and a GT documentation. A GT record is what is entered in Infinite Campus. When transferred, the GT record can be imported by clicking on the Kentucky State Reporting Import Wizard. Identification documentation is what is collected and filed as evidence that the student met regulation criteria. This is like what is filed in a special education student's due process folder. So again, a record and documentation are 2 different things. The record is what is entered into Infinite Campus, and documentation is what is collected as evidence. When you look in Infinite Campus, you may see that there are no GT documents to import because there is a line through the link. For any new students, contact the previous GTC for their documentation. If you're unsure if the student's prior district district contact the state GT consultant. If the previous district does not have documentation, begin collecting documentation from your district. According to the gifted regulation, students must meet criteria to be selected or identified for a GT program. The student is now enrolled in the district and is therefore the district's responsibility. Again, this does not mean that we are reevaluating the student. We are just collecting documentation to show the student met eligibility. Next, let's talk about completing the validation of GT Records Report. You can complete the validation of GT Records Report when state and local records have been compared and notes have been taken on the discrepancies and missing records have been imported and requests sent to previous districts for documentation. Documentation could also include gifted student service plans and progress reports. For the report, unduplicated numbers are needed for each category and for the total count of gifted students in the district. Once data has been compared, the Google form report can be completed. The report can't be saved and completed for later, so you may want to print out the report beforehand or review the questions before submitting responses. Save a copy of the report for district records. Next, we're going to talk about the annual program evaluation. The annual program evaluation should take place before you complete the summative evaluation report. Collecting this data should help your program for the next school year, and also you may want to share it with your school and district leadership. If the district does not have procedures for the program evaluation, now may be a good time to articulate the actions for each of the areas of the program evaluation. Most Kentucky School Board policies and procedures state that the GT coordinator will collect this information. So here are the areas that data will be collected from for the program evaluation. Overall student progress, student, parent, and faculty attitudes toward the program, community involvement, cost effectiveness, the incorporation of gifted education into the regular school program, overall quality of instruction and program personnel credentials, and future program directions and modifications. The first component of the program evaluation in the regulation is overall student progress. The district will need to collect data to answer questions on the summative evaluation about student progress. To do this, the district may need to review progress reports from the current school year for the summative evaluation. Other data could be examined as well, such as diagnostic assessments, grades, and the GT progress reports. Districts will need to break the data down into groups of progress for the summative evaluation by looking at grades 4 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. To answer the questions, districts will need to know, did most of the students in these grade levels meet, not meet, or exceed according to their progress reports? The next program evaluation component is student, parent, and faculty attitudes towards the program. Use the district procedures to collect feedback from students, parents, and faculty about the GT program. Then analyze the feedback to assess next steps for the program. If in the past the district has not received much feedback, you might try reaching out to someone in the stakeholder group to ask how this process could be improved. You might try multiple ways to collect feedback. This might include a parent meeting where the survey is given, and participants might take the survey at the meeting, Or it might be a digital survey, such as a Google form that is emailed to parents and guardians. You may want to save the surveys, meetings, and discussions where the results were analyzed. It's also important to think about communication. You may need to develop a communication plan to make sure that student, parent, and faculty attitudes are collected toward the program. The next component of the program evaluation is community involvement. Community involvement could be defined as how the GT program is involved in the community and how the community is a part of the GT program. For the program evaluation, there could be a discussion with notes taken and saved about community involvement. These notes could be saved, and documents such as flyers, invitation, newspaper articles could also be saved as artifacts for this component of the program evaluation. Cost effectiveness is another item which must be addressed as part of the program evaluation. For this item, it is recommended to schedule time with the finance administrator to get a copy of the GT Munis report. The GT Munis report includes information about how GT funds can be expended. This report could be reviewed with the supervisor and the GT committee. Discussions could involve how the money was spent, or other funds needed to address the needs of the program, and any other important topics about cost and funding. Don't forget that you may want to document any discussions. Next, there should be a discussion of the GT program and how it is a part of the district's overall instructional program. There could be discussions based on data and stakeholder feedback about any modifications needed. This item should be a discussion or a presentation about how gifted education is a part of the regular school program. The discussion of data and a presentation could include information about how many students are part of the program, what types of services are provided, how services are being provided, who is providing services, and what model is being used to provide services. There could be a discussion of enrichment and acceleration as they relate to the services that are being offered. Documentation could include lesson plans and meeting minutes. The next component is an overall quality of instruction. Overall quality of instruction and program personnel can include discussions about staff certification, hiring of additional staff, and pairing needs of students to the staff. The last part of the GT program evaluation is future program and directions and modifications. After all the data is collected from program components, the GT coordinator could analyze the data to determine future decisions for the program. After analyzing the data and improvement ideas could be shared with the supervisors and the GT committee. After sharing, next steps could be planned for the upcoming school year. You may want to document any of these discussions. Regulation states that data collected in the annual program evaluation shall be utilized in the school and district instructional planning process. This could mean that the data collected from the program evaluation must be used in school and district instructional planning. You may want to collaborate with building and district administrators and plan how the data will be used in the instructional planning for GT students. This could include discussions about scheduling, curriculum, and enrichment opportunities. Documentation could include agendas, meeting notes, continuous school improvement plans, and continuous district improvement plans. Some district policies state that the annual program evaluation will be shared with site-based decision-making councils and the local Board of Education. So you may want to check your school board policies to see what yours says. The next part we're going to talk about is directions for completing the summative evaluation. You may want to print out the summative evaluation Google form because, as stated earlier, once the form is started, you cannot save it and return to finish it at a later time. Once you have completed data cleanup, data validation, and the annual program evaluation, you will be ready to complete the summative evaluation. The GT Summative Evaluation Report is a short answer Google form. The report can't be saved and completed later, so again, you may want to print out the report or look at the questions before submitting responses. Please save a copy of the report for district records. So wrapping up, all end-of-year reports and materials will be posted to the GT Coordinator One Stop. If you do not have access to the GT Coordinator One Stop, please contact me for assistance. You can use the QR code or the link to the end-of-year ELA credit to receive ELA credit via email. This recording will be posted, as I said, on the GT Coordinator One Stop. I'll also post a PowerPoint presentation as well so that you can click on the links if you cannot use the QR code. Again, thank you for attending the training. I hope it has been helpful for you. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions.